Hey guys, it's Tori, and it is that time of year. It's time for the mid-year freakout tag and my mid-year goal check-in. Now I usually do these in separate videos, but I have a lot of videos I want to do right now that I'm kind of working my way through. So in order to be able to get everything in, I'm just doubling up on my mid-year freakout tag, and then at the end I'll do my goal check-in. So I will put a timestamp in the description if you just want to see my goal check-in to see where I'm at. Although the mid-year freakout tag is fun because it will be me discussing what I've read so far this year and some of my thoughts a little bit more, whereas my goal check-in I'm kind of just gonna run through general things with where I'm at with my goals. So let's jump into the questions because there are 13 and I don't want this video to be too long. So first of all, I will mention that this tag was originally created by, I think her name's Shammy. I will link her YouTube channel down below. I don't know if her original video is still up. It was made a few years ago at this point, and yeah, I'm not sure if she still has it up, but I will definitely link her channel down below. But the first question is, what is the best book you've read this year so far? And I actually had 5 possibilities of books. I really could not decide between these 5 books which one I wanted to talk about for this question. So I kind of just went through the rest of the questions, and 4 of them I ended up putting in other places, and so I just decided to go with the one that I didn't find another place for, and that is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by Victoria Schwab or V.E. Schwab. I really loved this book. This book follows a girl who ends up making a deal with a demon that she'll be able to live forever, live free, do what she wants. But unfortunately, the price she has to pay is that no one will ever remember her. As soon as they or she leaves the room, she is out of their mind forever, and basically she can never be remembered by people. And so we follow 2 timelines. We follow the early 1700s when she makes this deal and kind of how her life starts out, her new life starts out, and then we also follow her in 2014 as she's continuing to live this life and something changes a little bit. This was such a wonderful book with very interesting themes, very interesting characters, very character driven, so if that's not your jam, keep that in mind. But I found it to be really interesting and one that I really enjoyed, which I wasn't sure if I would because I have read Victoria Schwab in the past and didn't really love some of her other things that I've read by her. So I wasn't sure if it would be for me, but this one definitely really surprised me and I just absolutely loved it. The second question is, what is the best sequel that you've read this year? And I have only read 1 sequel this year and I did enjoy it, so we can just say it. I ended up reading Wars of the Roses, Margaret of Anjou by Con Iggulden, which is the second book in the Wars of the Roses series by him, and I really enjoyed it. I think I gave it like 4.5 out of 5 stars, so definitely a lot of fun, interesting characters, very interesting dynamics. I really like Margaret of Anjou as a character in this, so it was fun to get a little bit more inside her head as she continues to grow as a queen and things like that. It was a lot of fun. Question 3 is a new release that has come out that you haven't read yet and you want to, and I'm going to go with The Witch's Heart by Genevieve Gornichek, I think is how you pronounce her name. This book came out in February and it follows, I think it's pronounced Agbotha, who was one of the lovers, the mistresses of Loki, and she actually gave birth to 3 children who are going to play a role in Ragnarok, in kind of the end of days scenario in Norse mythology. And having just read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology, I really am extra excited to pick this up. I already was because it kind of had a little bit of a Circe by Madeline Miller vibe, which I really like. But also now that I know a little bit more about Agbotha and about Norse mythology in general, I think I'm really going to enjoy it. Question 4 is an anticipated release, so something that's coming up. And I'm actually going to choose one that's coming out later in June that I just barely found out is going to be a thing, and I'm so excited, and that's My Contrary Mary by Cynthia Hand, Brody Ashton, and Jody Meadows. I think I got their names right. But this is the start of a new series by them. They have done in the past the Lady Janie series, which it was a trilogy about 3 different Janes in history. So the first one was about Lady Jane Grey, who was Queen of England for 9 days. The second one was about Jane Eyre, and then the third one was about Calamity Jane, and all of them added like supernatural elements to the story and just kind of made it a lot more fun and funny. And now they're doing a Mary series, and this first one's going to be about Mary, Queen of Scots. So I'm very excited for this. I'm glad that I was able to discover it's happening. I have not read My Calamity Jane yet. I just have not been as intrigued by the Western style of it, although I know it has something to do with werewolves, which does kind of draw me to it, but I just haven't picked that one up, but this one hopefully I'll be able to get my hands on because it sounds very intriguing. Question 5 is biggest disappointment of the year, and I had a couple books that I'd consider least favorites of the year, but neither of them I really expected to love anyway. I mean, one of them I thought I could maybe, but I didn't have very high hopes. I just kind of wanted to give them both a shot. So I'm not going to go with those because I didn't really find them to be disappointments. They just kind of ended up being what I expected them to be. The one that did end up being a little bit more of a disappointment was Bulette by Charlotte Bronte. Now, I still gave it like 4 out of 5 stars, and really, I enjoyed it, I had fun with it, but there was a part of me that hoped I would really love it, that it would become potentially my favorite Charlotte Bronte novel, but it didn't. It's one of those books where I enjoyed it, I liked a lot of things about it, but I can totally understand why people hate it. I can totally understand that. Personally, for me, it worked fine. There were things I really did like about it and stuff, but I did kind of hope for a little bit more from it that I didn't get, so it did end up being a disappointment. Question 6 is biggest surprise, and I'm going to go with 2. They're both by the same author, and the author they're by is part of why it was surprising, and I'll explain that after I explain what they are. It is The Woodlanders and The Return of the Native, both by Thomas Hardy. These are 2 of the others that were on my top 5 of the year so far that I was struggling to decide between. But what was surprising about these was that they actually beat out Far From the Madding Crowd in my ranking of Hardy novels. There was a part of me that thought it could happen, specifically with these 2 books, just from what I had heard about them, but I wasn't really sure, and then I read them and I found actually they are probably pretty high up there. I actually probably do enjoy them even more than Far From the Madding Crowd, which really surprised me because I love Far From the Madding Crowd, but both of these just really stood out to me. In the past couple months, I have been saying that The Woodlanders is now my second favorite Hardy novel after, of course, Tess of the D'Urbervilles, but the more I think about it, the more I actually might, like, the further I get from both of them, the more I'm like, actually, I might like Return of the Native a little bit better. So you'll just have to wait and see on my ranking video, my Thomas Hardy ranking video at the end of the year, what I end up thinking about them. I'm very back and forth on which one I like more, but both of them did beat out, like I said, Far From the Madding Crowd, which was a surprise for me. Question 7, a fave new to you author. And I'm going to go with an author that I actually did read some last year, but it wasn't enough for me to know that they were a favorite author, but now I would consider them a favorite author, and that is Edith Wharton. I last year read The Age of Innocence, really enjoyed it, and then a few months later I read Ethan Frome by Edith Wharton and really didn't like it. And then recently, though, I read The House of Mirth, which is another one of my 5 that I mentioned at the beginning for best book of the year so far, and I absolutely fell in love with it. So after The Age of Innocence and this, I just feel like, even with Ethan Frome not liking it as much, I think I really like her stuff. I think for the most part I'm going to enjoy what she has to write, what stories she had to tell, and I'm excited to continue with her. Question 8 is a new fictional crush, and I actually really struggled to come up with an answer for this. I didn't really have any that have stood out to me this year. I'm pretty picky about my fictional crushes, so I wasn't really sure, but I did finally decide on a character from a book I very recently read, and that is Loki from Norse mythology. I read Neil Gaiman's Norse mythology just recently, like literally, I think I finished it yesterday from when I'm filming this, which you should be seeing this about like a week and a half after I filmed it, so, but I did just recently finish it, and I mean, I love Loki in the Marvel movies, definitely have a crush on him in the Marvel movies, but hearing these stories, he's just kind of got that bad boy cunning vibe that I end up being drawn to. He's definitely a fictional crush, and if he was real, I would never want it to move past a crush. I wouldn't ever want an actual relationship with him because he's kind of awful, but there's just something a little bit, you know, sexy about him. So anyway, we're gonna go with, yes, Loki from Norse mythology. Question 9 is a new favorite character, and I'm kind of going to bend this a little bit. I'm gonna go with a real person, not just a character, but I read a book about them, so they were kind of a character in that book. But that is Anne Bronte, and The Brontes by Juliet Barker is my 5th of those books that I mentioned that I couldn't decide between which one was my favorite. I already knew knew before I read this that I liked Anne Bronte probably the most. I like her books the most out of all the Bronte novels for my personal tastes, and I just really found myself drawn to her. But reading this just really solidified her as one of my favorite figures, not just a writer, but a figure in history. She just has such a quiet integrity and quiet strength to her that I just admire so much. I actually Buddy read this with Emily from Novelle Novels, and I think both of us really just fell in love with Anne. And so I definitely, I had other characters I considered, several from books I've already mentioned, so I wanted to kind of branch out a little bit more on what I was discussing. And the person in a book I read this year that has stood out to me the most is definitely Anne Bronte. Question 10 is a book that made you cry, and I have had a lot of books make me cry this year, but I'm going to choose one that I haven't mentioned yet, and that is Room by Emma Donoghue. This is a wonderful book following the perspective of a young boy who lives with his mother in this room. It's his entire world, and that's because the mother was actually abducted when she was in college, and his father is the abductor, and it's a really difficult story, as you can imagine, based on that premise. And there were definitely moments that it made me emotional, especially being in this boy's head where you as an adult know what is going on, but he just doesn't understand it, and it can be very heartbreaking. Question 11 is a book that made you happy, and I'm going to go with Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones for this. I absolutely loved this. This was a reread, but it's been a very long time since I read it, so I didn't really remember that much at all. And I just really love those fairy tale-esque middle grade stories. They just get me, they just make me smile, and I absolutely loved listening to the audiobook for this. I definitely was smiling and laughing in my car and just absolutely adored it, so definitely have to go with that one, even though it was a reread. Question 12 is a beautiful book that you purchased, and this is the only one I physically have with me because I feel like you have to see it because it's about it being a beautiful book. And the book I chose, I mean, I've bought several books that I think are pretty, but this one I specifically bought this edition because it was so beautiful. It's a book that I wanted to read anyway. It came out last year, and the American edition was horrendous, but the UK edition was absolutely gorgeous. So I went out of my way to get the UK edition because it was prettier. And then it got sent in the mail and it got a little bent up, which I'm kind of sad about. But you can still see the beauty, and that is Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell. Have not read this yet, but this cover is just so gorgeous. I absolutely love this UK cover. It's all so shiny on there, but I absolutely love this cover, and the American edition is not nearly even sort of this pretty. So yeah, this is one that I specifically look at that. Anyway, but this is one I went out of my way to get it just because it was pretty and I wanted the pretty one. So anyway, there's my answer for that. And the final question, question 13, is a book you need to read by the end of the year. And I have several books I need to read before the end of the year for my goals, which I'll mention in a bit. But the one I'm going to mention right now is one that I'm actually a little worried I'm not going to get to by the end of the year. So this is kind of my slight extra push to maybe try to finish it or figure out a solution with it, because I do want to get to it at some point, but I just have not really felt much motivation to get to it. But that is The Princetta by, I think it's Marie something. Anyway, here's the cover. This will be a reread. This is one of my reread choices for the year, and I just haven't really felt drawn to read it. And even right now, thinking about, oh, maybe I'll get to it November, December time, I still don't really feel much inclination to get to it. So I may end up switching out my reread and rereading something else. I might just reread Ink Death by Cornelia Funke, which is the final book in the Inkheart series instead, because that one's one I'm really drawn to read, but this one I'm not drawn to read this one. And it's one that I do want to reread at some point because I just am very curious. It's the first book I ever sob cried at. So I want to see how I'd feel about it now, but I don't know. I just don't have much draw to it right now, so we'll see if that actually happens. Okay, so that is the end of the mid-year freakout tag. Now let's go into my goal check-ins. So if you have not seen my goals for this year, I will link that video down below so you can check it out and see what my goals were if you're curious. But I do have my lovely checklist and my planner that I've been making my way through, and I had 24 books to start off with that I needed to get through by the end of the year. So I'm just gonna run through each of the goals, where I'm at with them, and yeah, that will kind of wrap out this video. So the first goal I had was to finish all of Thomas Hardy's full-length novels. I had 4 left to read at the beginning of the year. I have read, like I mentioned in my freakout tag, I have read The Return of the Native and The Woodlanders, both 5 stars, both fabulous. And so all I have left is The Well-Beloved, which I was originally planning on getting to in November or December, but I'm getting into a Hardy mood. Not gonna lie, I'm getting the Hardy itch that I tend to get every few months. And so I may pick it up in July. Apparently July is turning into a month where I read something for Jane Austen July, I read a book by Jane Austen, and then I read a Hardy novel, because the same thing happened last year. I read Jane Austen and then I read Hardy. So may end up happening this year. And then the other one I need to read is Jude the Obscure, which I think I'm going to read in Victober. And I actually had planned, discussed a little bit with Emily from Novelle Novels to read it with her for Victober, but I don't think we've really discussed it since, so we'll see if she's still down to do that with me. Then we have finishing Jane Austen, which I had 2 left to read by her at the beginning of the year, and I did read Mansfield Park already. Gave it 4 stars, really enjoyed it. And then I have Persuasion left, which I'm actually buddy reading with Katja Weinert from Read, Write, Create, and we'll probably be reading that for Jane Austen July right towards the beginning of the month, so in the next few weeks. Then I had to finish all of Charlotte Bronte's novels, well, just the Bronte novels in general, but all I really had left were 2 of Charlotte's works. And the first Villette I did, like I mentioned, already read, gave it 4 stars. Not in love with it, but I did enjoy a lot about it, enough to give it 4 stars, with more than 3 stars. So, you know, I enjoyed it quite a bit. I just hoped for a little bit more from it. And then we had The Professor is the only one I have left to read, and I'll probably get to that one in November or December. It's kind of one that I'm pushing off a little bit because I have some other priority books that I'll mention in a minute. Then we have my long classics goal. I've had this goal for a few years, and usually I just pick one classic that's over 1,000 pages that I pick up. But this year I decided to do 2 slightly shorter long classics, and so I ended up picking Moby Dick, which I did finish, and that one was lower on my rating scale, but I didn't expect a ton from it, so it was definitely probably a least favorite of the year, but there were things I enjoyed about it. Like, I didn't absolutely hate it. I just feel like it should have been sold in a different way. Like, if I go into a fiction story, I expect to have a fiction story, and I felt like I had an essay. And if I go into a book expecting a story and I don't get one, that's just kind of frustrating. So anyway, and then my other long classic was Anna Karenina, which I'm over halfway through, and hopefully, I'm hoping I can get it done by the end of June. That's my goal. If it goes a little bit into July, it's fine. But if I can finish it by the end of June, that would be stellar. Then I wanted to read The Brontes by Juliet Barker, and as I mentioned, I did do that with Emily from Novelle Novels. Absolutely loved it. Then I had my Shakespeare goal, which I have read Much Ado About Nothing, and then by the time you're seeing this video, I should have done Coriolanus. I'm planning on, so I'm filming this on June 9th, Wednesday, and I'm planning on listening to it on this Friday, and this video is not going up until the next Friday, as far as I remember from my scheduling. So by the time you see this, I'll have finished Coriolanus as well. Much Ado About Nothing I did really like. Hopefully I'll enjoy Coriolanus. And then Henry VI, all 3 parts, is the last part of this goal. And I'm thinking I may try to get to it in September for, I think it's called ShakeTube, although I think they're changing the name. And I can't remember who hosts it. I think Rainy from Rainy Day Reads might be one that hosts it. Question mark, maybe. But I believe it's in September, and so I may read it then. If I don't read it then, it will be November or December. And then we have my 6 Victorian reads, which I want to read before Victober. So I have a few more months left to do these. These are the priority ones that are causing me to push a lot of the other ones to November, December. So the books I've read so far from this list are The Half-Sisters by Geraldine Dewsbury, Great Expectations by Charles Dickens, and Adam Bede by George Eliot, all of which I have really, really enjoyed. And the last 3 that I have are North and South, which I plan on buddy reading with Connor Stompanato in August. Then He Knew He Was Right by Anthony Trollope, which is a longer one that I'm hoping I'll start either in July or August and then read through September if I have to. But I'd like to, sometime in July or August, at least start that one. And then we have A Study in Scarlet by Sir Arthur Conan Doyle, which I think I'm going to just listen to on audiobook, I decided. and I think I'm going to do that hopefully in July is kind of what I'm leaning towards, so we'll see how it goes. In fact, I'll probably listen to that right after I finish Anna Karenina, which I'm also already listening to on audiobook, so hopefully that's how that will work out. And then my last challenge is rereads. So I have 4 rereads that I planned to do this year. The first was The Great Gatsby, which I did do. DNF'd the book because I honestly was reading it to see if I could like it now. Still hate it. So DNF'd that one. And then I read Howl's Moving Castle by Diana Wynne Jones, which I already mentioned in my tag and really enjoyed. Then the last 2 I have are Jane Eyre, first of all, which I'm planning on reading through Victober, excuse me. And then the other one is The Princetta, which I already mentioned is one I'm not really sure at this point I'm actually gonna get to. I may have to replace it with a different reread. If I get to it, it would probably be November or December. But like I said, I may switch that title out, which I will count as a success to an extent, but I also will kind of see it as a little bit of a failure because I did have these specific books I wanted to get to. So it won't be a complete success if I don't get to that one. But as long as I reread something else, I'll feel like I'm still maintaining the habits I want to maintain. So anyway, that's the run through of my check-in. That's the freak out tag. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books, what you thought of them, how you're doing on your goals, some of your favorites of the year, least favorites of the year so far. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you next time.